Have you ever felt stuck, as if something's holding you back from living the fullness of life that God has for you? Have you ever felt limited, like there is a boundary line or a ceiling keeping you from moving forward or expanding or growing or just being fully who you were created to be? I'm sure you have. Most people have, but sometimes there's that actual sense of this barrier or limitation. I wanted to continue this journey that we've been going on for the last few times of talking about breaking free from lack and limitation. And in this video, I want to talk specifically about breaking free from limitations and these barriers that come around us. And a lot of times, this particular time, I want to talk about how our limitations can be rooted in past experiences or beliefs that are no longer around. They're no longer serving us, but they were created at one point in time to keep us safe. Or they were put on us or imposed on us, and they're no longer there, but we still have the experience of them being there. How do we start to get free from that? My name is Kirsten Larson, wholeness coach, and I love bringing in the concept of our body, our soul, and our spirit, and how we can begin to operate in all that God has called us to while looking at the whole person. So in this short video, we are going to talk about how we can actually break free from the mental, emotional, and even physical limitations by actually leaning into God's protection and his limitless freedom. So they sound like they might be two opposing ideas, but we're going to look at that so that you don't have to stay stuck anymore and you can know how to step out into the open field that God has for you. So I want to just talk about how we can feel this way. I know I have felt this way many times in my life, and it comes out in many different ways. Like we talked about in the lack, breaking free from lack, lack manifests itself in different ways, and so do limitations. And a lot of times we can beat ourselves up for having a limitation. We can say, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't seem to move forward. If you've ever said that, I have said that. You're not alone. But I also want to speak to this place of realizing that it's not your fault. It comes from something a long time ago. It comes from either deep internal belief systems. It comes from past wounds and traumas. It comes from issues that we've had that are deeply ingrained in our system that we can actually release and break through from. So hopefully that sounds exciting. Sometimes limitations are not as they feel. And there are many other ways, many other reasons, but we're just looking at this one area today on how these limitations that we no longer have, but we still experience. And so I want to share this example from the elephant and the rope. If you've heard me before, you know that I have shared this many times, but I want to bring it into the concept of breaking free and moving past these barriers and limitations. So if you haven't heard this story, hopefully you have. I'm going to make it short, but the elephant, as they've done this study before, I did share this in my last video as well. So the elephant, they put a chain around its ankle when it's young, and it learns very quickly it cannot move past the chain. It learns it so well, it gets deeply ingrained into the cellular memory of its body that when it gets older and it is big and strong and fierce, they can put as much as a light rope around its ankle attached to a very small peg, and the physical sensation of that rope around its ankle allows it to stay still. And that means that we don't have to invest as much in keeping it stuck. And a lot of times as Christians especially, we tend to blame the enemy for our barriers, our limitations. And I want to pose a different angle on this. It is true that there is a real enemy who tries to keep us limited and in lack and in a place of being stuck. He does not want us to shine brightly in the way that God has called us to. But we also have a created mind, body, heart, and nervous system that God has actually created to hardwire into our system to keep us safe. We have a beautiful limbic system in our brain that is hardwired by God to say, if this happens in your life, especially while you're young, that your brain begins to say, that is not safe, right? And it wires it into your system. We have memories in our physical body. One fun way of just testing that memory in your body is actually just to tap on your hand for a few seconds and then close your eyes, tune into the sensation on your hand, and maybe it's buzzing a little, maybe it's tingling, maybe you can just feel the warmth in that area. It's a memory. Now your hand has that physical sensation of you just touching it and hitting it. We have these memories stored through our five senses, through the sense of smell, which they say the olfactory is one of the strongest senses of our memory. It can go straight to the memory center. You can smell those chocolate chip cookies and be brought right back to your childhood in a happy moment of making cookies and enjoying them. And it can go back to a negative or a positive. Usually it is a strong memory, one way or the other. Those neutral memories are a little harder to access. But we have physical, sound, visual, and feeling in all the different ways we can experience a memory. And so when we are thinking of breaking free from limitations, we want to actually bring in the whole being, the whole person, and recognize that sometimes these limitations don't exist anymore, but my brain, my heart, my emotional world, and my body are trying to keep me safe. And my brain, heart, and body don't know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. My heart, brain, and body don't know the difference between what is actually happening right now or in the past 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. All it recognizes is the sensation, just like the elephant, right? And so what can happen is we can have a physical sensation that reminds our brain of something 30 years ago and begins to just instantly tell our system, don't move forward, don't move past that. And so what we want to do is get ourselves aware of the sensations we're experiencing, whether they're pleasant, neutral, or not so good, and recognizing what kind of belief they're creating, right? If someone were to tell that elephant, hey, that's just a rope, you're bigger, and you can actually break through from that very easily, could you imagine that elephant would be like, oh, I feel so silly. And we have this happening to us all of the time. Scientists actually believe that we might operate out of 95% of our life out of our subconscious. Just think about driving to places that you go to regularly, driving to the grocery store, to work, to pick up someone, come home. You do this all from your subconscious because you've done it over and over again. You're doing it on a level that is not fully present. I experienced this a few months ago. Rather embarrassing, but gonna just share how this works. But I've lived in my same place for 14 years, and I always drive the same way, do that. And so when I began learning several years ago more and more about brain science and how the brain works, I started taking different routes and doing that. But one day I was going on the same route, driving my same path, and I always look for this bright yellow sign to turn right on. So they put up a new bright yellow sign. I didn't know about it. And it was the block sooner than my street. But I'm driving out of my subconscious. I'm just driving home. I'm not fully aware. I'm aware of the cars and the traffic, of course, just as you are, but we know them. It's in our neural pathways, it's in our nervous system, and it's in our brain pathway. We have wired together those signals and pieces inside of our system, it works on the positive as well. So anyhow, I end up just driving down and I suddenly am on the wrong street because the trigger that my brain had in the positive was a yellow sign, and my brain sees the first yellow sign and turns right. Suddenly I am on the wrong street. Now, that only took me one time to do that, but then I suddenly realized, wow, that sign was never there before, and it's the same sign one block over, and I had to turn around and come back. But I laughed to myself, knowing that was my mental trigger to turn right. So similarly, we can have mental triggers that actually keep us safe, and they keep us blocked, they keep us from moving forward. And so why do these get set up? These get set up originally to keep us safe, right? So we might learn that the stove is hot by touching it. We might learn that certain things are not safe to do. It's not safe to speak up. It's not safe to fully be who I am. It's not safe to shine. It's not safe to, just spend too much money. It's not safe to go that direction. And so we unintentionally or intentionally create boundary lines around ourselves. We do this especially in that 0 to 8 year range, because that's a time frame where we don't have the abstract thinking. We don't have that rational thinking to sit there and go, oh, that's okay. This is a different experience. And so I'm going to figure out how to look at this a little bit differently. It's just simply, I am living out of my needs, my wants. I'm creating a world of safety to live in. And so similarly to the elephant, when we are young, and these boundary lines can be put up when we are older as well. We can hear things being taught to us, whether from work, our family, our church life, and different environments, school, and telling us, oh, don't do that. If you do that, this will happen. Don't do that. So we create a belief system inside of ourselves, and we start to say, oh, I can't do that. And it drops into our subconscious, and suddenly we just believe, I can't do that. So what begins to happen is we have either a physical sensation that says, oh, when I feel that feeling in my chest, that tightness in my chest, we don't say it cognitively, but we say it internally, I can't move past that. So when I start to begin to shine and I feel this tightness in my throat, oh, that is a signal to me, stop. It's no longer safe to move forward, right? And that is the example of the elephant and the rope. Is we have that in our own lives, where you might have a tightness in your throat, or you might start getting a headache, or you might get shortness of breath, or this tightness in your chest, or you might have spinning thoughts, or you might just completely shut down. And these boundary lines, these limitations, you feel them physically, or you might have, like I said, these limiting beliefs that might even show up subconsciously. This happened for me years ago when I felt the prompting of the Lord to start my own business. I started feeling like, I can't do that. Now, had I not started my own business, I actually wouldn't have had the thought, I can't do it, because it wasn't even a train of thought. And it wasn't until I began moving and trying to extend my boundary lines and trying to expand who I was and show up as who I was that I even recognized that there were limitations and boundaries on who I believed I was and what I was capable of. And so I had to begin processing some of these pieces that I'm sharing with you today. So I want to share with you this scripture verse that is really powerful in understanding this component. Psalm 16, 5-6. Oh, I love this verse because it has so many pieces to it. So it says that the Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. God is my everything, is what he's saying. And he says, you hold my lot. And it says, the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. So I want to bring this back to this area, is what he is saying, what David is saying in this psalm. Especially back then, they literally meant the physical boundary lines of my property. But I want to use it in terms of the boundary lines that God has created for you are both set in a safe and secure place, as well as full of freedom and limitlessness. Okay, so the boundary lines that we set up for ourselves, whether by our beliefs, whether by something someone said or did to us, whether by our own self creating an internal system of a boundary line to keep us safe, that does not allow freedom to come in. But when we get to expand into God's boundary lines for us, we get to begin to experience physically, mentally, emotionally the safety that God has. There's a freedom and a limitlessness and an unlimited nature that God has for us within His protection. You see, a lot of times we don't want, this is the secret and this is the answer, we don't want to expand or extend our personal safety boundary lines because of the issue of safety. Our internal brain wiring is hardwired to keep us safe. And so what we want to do is we want to begin releasing those places in our physical body, in our emotional world, and in our mind to begin to expand, to feel safe within the boundary lines that God has set for us. Come on, this is good. So this is what I love, releasing healing in a way that is physical, mental, and emotional. Of course, we invite God's presence. It's spiritual as well. We're stepping into that place. But no matter how much you know in your mind that God's boundary line is extended beyond what you can imagine, if your body and your brain and your heart don't feel that and don't experience it, then you won't be able to step into it. And so what we want to do is we want to release those things. When you begin to experience, oh, I can expand my boundary line. We step into that place of Isaiah 54 where he tells her, extend your tent pegs, extend that, and then I will fill it. There is a limitless nature of God that is filled with abundant supply of all that you need. But sometimes we are living in such a small space to keep ourselves safe, there isn't room for God to fill it. So we want to expand it. So just as the elephant had the room and the strength and the full capacity within him to break free from the limitations of the rope, so do you and I have the same capacity within us to break free from every limitation, limiting belief, and experience that has been holding you back. Every pain, every fear, every trauma, every doubt, you have everything you need inside of you to break free and to break out. Whoa. I hope that encourages you today. We're going to be doing some activations in my workshop on abundance, breaking free from lack and limitation, and stepping into God's abundance. His abundant love, hope, His provision, and His experience. We're going to expand those boundary lines through actual practices of doing it together, helping your body feel safe to expand, helping your heart and emotions to feel safe to step into that, and helping your brain begin to rewire and retrain to experience all that God has for you. So come on and join us, wholelifefreedom.com/abundance. And if you can't join us live, join the replay. It's going to be really powerful. I want to see you break free. I want to see you expand those limits so that you can be who God has called you to be. He wants to see you free, thriving, alive, and doing all that's in your heart to do. So I bless you right now in your body, in your mind, in your heart, and in your spirit, to be free from the boundary lines and limitations that have been placed on you through life. And I release you into the pleasant, expanded, boundary lines that the loving Father has for you. And I release that over you in Jesus'